for the technical problems we had. Mr. Mfume, you're now recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thanks again for holding this hearing. The muting button wouldn't let me mute, so I couldn't get off of the screen to do that. But anyway, now that we're back in operation, I want to go back to Mr. Smith's testimony, if I might. Mr. Smith, you were naming a number of significant people elected and appointed who were opposed to statehood, and you mentioned the former Congressman Fauntleroy. What was his opposition? Do you know?
I do, Congressman. Delegate Fauntleroy was advocating for other voting rights legislation for district residents, but he was saying that he wanted to be clear with other members of Congress that he was not advocating for D.C. statehood because, in his words, that would be in direct defiance of the prescriptions of
I'm going to reclaim my time on that, Mr. Harris. I'm not trying to figure out where Mr. Fauntleroy was in the 1970s, but rather where he was all along since then. And he was a big, strong advocate of D.C. statehood. In fact, we took a train, he and I, and a number of members of the Congress from New York back down to Washington, with each stop having a rally for D.C. statehood. So I think you probably want to check your facts on that, because Walter Fauntleroy was not against statehood. Now, on the other side, I want to just go back, if I might. I think I might be, Madam Chair, one of the only 3 or 4 members of Congress that voted in 1993 in favor of statehood and voted last year the same way. And I remember the argument then from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. It was not, this is a power grab, as we continue to hear now, but it was that DC couldn't handle its own finances. So go show us and prove to us that you can run a city and be financially responsible, and then come back and then we'll consider statehood. Well, 28 years later, here we are. And I want to go to Mr. Lee for just a few questions. Mr. Lee, what is the percentage of revenue generated locally, not by the federal government?
About 3/4 of the revenue are generated locally.
Thank you. And for how many years have you had a clean audit?
24 years.
And that's been consecutive, correct?
Consecutive, that's correct.
And are your pension funds fully funded?
Yes, Congressman.
Thank you. And in terms of capital reserves, are you at a level that most banks and other such institutions consider to be proper?
That's correct. And our AAA credit rating that was granted a few years ago is a reflection of that.
Thank you. So I think the notion now is no longer can you handle your own financial business, but whether or not this is going to be a power grab. Madam Chair, I don't have any other questions. I want to yield my time to the Mayor of the District of Columbia and thank her again for her testimony.
Thank you. Thank you, Congressman, for focusing on the district's healthy finances, and we want to thank our Office of the Chief Financial Officer. I also want to recognize the work of the Council of the District of Columbia and Council Chairman Phil Mendelson. The Council has undertaken a number of measures that we have imposed on ourselves that are in our local law that will help us maintain those healthy finances. I also just want to say, Madam Chair, there have been a number of statements about this power grab by Democrats in the Congress. And I have to say, our quest for statehood has nothing to do with the current Congress. Our quest for statehood is long-standing, and it's really rooted in our values and the values of both parties. We talk about fairness and democracy and justice, but we also support the principles of liberty and freedom and local autonomy. And that is what H.R. 51 embodies for the residents of the District of Columbia. So we stand ready to work with you on the passage. We know that the issues that have been raised have been roundly refuted. Our Congresswoman put on the record the testimony of Viet Dinh, who is a a conservative constitutional scholar who squarely deals with the issues related to the 23rd Amendment. Your colleague, Congressman Raskin, in our last hearing, squarely dealt with the issues of Maryland's interest, or Maryland's no longer interest in what makes up the District of Columbia. And H.R. 51 squarely deals with the issue of the federal district. The Congress will continue to exercise plenary authority over the federal district.
Thank you very much. The gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Norman, is recognized for 5 minutes. Mr. Norman, you're now recognized.